Now what? What's up, MMA fans, old and new, expert and casual? This is Sophisticated MMA. I'm Kate, and welcome to my channel. Here we'll talk about all things MMA, fight results, opinion pieces, and possibly most importantly, discussing information that I wish I had had when I was diving into the MMA community. Okay, so now that we've got that taken care of, let's get into it. We had 3 absolutely incredible cards so far since the UFC started opening things back up. And since it's pretty much the only sport on right now, don't get me started on NASCAR. It doesn't count. I'm guessing that there are a lot of people who are tuning in just because it's the only thing to watch. So if you are new to MMA, I highly recommend that you start to, if you can, watch some of the undercards, some of the prelims, because that has some of the best fights. Even if you don't know the names or you don't know what's going on, those are some of the best fights to watch. So just as a side note. So incredible performances was one of the things that all 3 cards had in common, but another thing that all 3 cards had in common was controversy, particularly some controversial stoppages. There was a lot of conversations surrounding a few of the fights on these cards, and we're gonna get into that. Don't worry, I'll cover judging probably in the next video, but I know that that is another pretty big topic right now. So first, let's get into a recap. So UFC 249, Henry Cejudo versus Dominick Cruz for the UFC Bantamweight title. So big fight, big things on the line. Dominick got dropped by a knee late in the second round, and Henry followed it up with some pretty good shots, pretty rapid shots against the fence. Dom's on the ground. And referee Keith Peterson eventually steps in to stop the fight right at the end. I pulled up the stats post-fight just because I was curious to see what the numbers had been leading up to that point, and they were relatively even. It looked like Cejudo was outscoring so far. But what was really interesting was that the official time of the fight being stopped was 5 minutes in the second round, which means that according to the official record, Keith Peterson stopped it at the bell. Now, I don't remember hearing the bell, but that's the official stop time. All right, so next, Fight Night, Anthony Smith, Glover Teixeira, light heavyweight bout. Not for a belt or anything, but still a pretty big fight because it could determine who's in contention for a light heavyweight championship run. So the fight started out pretty well for Smith. He came out strong, fast, a lot of output. He's throwing a lot of strikes, more than I expected to see in the beginning. But somewhere around the middle-ish of the second round, the fight started to turn. By some miracle, Smith survived rounds 3 and 4, taking just an unbelievable amount of damage. I think when I looked, Teixeira threw over 200 significant strikes throughout that fight. So Smith took a bit of a beating. And then at the end of the 4th round, there was the now somewhat infamous exchange of, "Oh man, my teeth have fallen out. Breathe, just breathe." So there was some confusion within the fan base as to whether or not that fight should have been stopped or the referee should have come in. It was finally called by Jason Herzog at 1 minute 4 seconds in the 5th round. And finally, UFC 250, Alistair Overeem and Walt Harris, heavyweight bout. Again, not for a title or anything, but definitely a big deal. Harris looked really great early in the first round, got the drop on Overeem, looked like the fight could have been finished right then and there, but he maybe went too hard, too fast, started gassing out a little bit. Overeem made it through the first round into the second round. Totally different fight in the second round. And Overeem is one of those dudes that you have to finish him or he's coming back to get you. Eventually getting stopped, TKO for Overeem at about minute 3 of the second round, called by referee Dan Mergliata. Okay, so let's get into the controversies. And here's probably where our opinions are going to differ a little bit, but I welcome new evidence and new opinions. I'm very much still learning, but here's what I thought. So UFC 249 with Cruz and Cejudo. I believe the rule that I've heard, or the unofficial or unspoken rule, is that after 3 unanswered shots, a ref can stop a fight. The refs are there, of course, to protect the fighters, to make sure everybody's adhering to the rules and all of that, but they're also there to make sure nobody dies. So having a ref stop the fight, usually, in many cases, it's better to err on the side of caution. We can kind of go back to that controversial stop of Ben Askren and Robbie Lawler, where everybody was arguing he wasn't out or he was out and there was 2 minutes left and Askren had him in a bulldog choke and he could have broken his neck and blah, blah, blah. And the argument went on and on and on. And Herb Dean's main statement was, I would rather call it early and be safe than call it late and have somebody get hurt. That was pretty much the statement that he stood on. By those measures, good stop, because Henry probably landed, 10 unanswered shots while Dom was essentially crouched in the corner on the ground against the fence. Where it gets a little bit tricky for me is this is a bantamweight fight. Henry Cejudo, while he is an unbelievably talented combat athlete, he's no Francis Ngannou. He's not putting your lights out with one shot. It's a little bit different, in my opinion, when you're talking about the lower weight classes and when to stop the fight versus the higher weight classes and when to stop the fight. But with this one, the first thing that I looked at was, well, they're bantamweights. Like, let it go a little bit longer because Dom wasn't out. He certainly was rocked by the knee, but he wasn't out, and he looked pretty coherent after the fight. So let it go a little bit longer. Especially because, and this is where it gets even more definitive for me, that it was, I don't know if I would call it an early stop, but I would say maybe not the right stop, is that I thought when I was watching it, there was only a couple seconds left in the round. And now going back to see what the official time was, it was like on the dot. They called it at the end of the round. Oh, God, I'm just getting a little bit excited about this. I've seen other title fights and other fights, as I will get into later, where the referee, in his own judgment, decided, I'm going to let him survive this because it's close. And the referees know when there's less than 10 seconds, you hear that every time you hear that little clapping sound, that's signaling there's 10 seconds left in the round. So Keith knew round is almost over. So could Cruz have survived 10 seconds of unanswered shots from Henry Cejudo? I think so. And I think you let it go because it's a title fight. In any other scenario, call it a good stop. Because a similar thing happened when he fought TJ Dillashaw. But in that fight, there were, I'm not going to remember this right, but I think they were only 2 minutes into the fight, if that, when that happened. In that case, there's still plenty of time for Dillashaw to take a beating. In this case, the round was over. Cruz just had to survive it. I have argued with some people that Dominic was rising to his feet. He was getting up. He was still showing that he was defending himself. I've kind of abandoned that argument because I think it's far more important to look at how much time was left in the round and whether or not he was able to survive that, and I think he was. So 249, I wouldn't say early stop, I would just say bad stop, questionable stop. UFC Fight Night, Anthony Smith, Glover Teixeira. This one was interesting. I give all the props to referee Jason Herzog for not calling this fight, especially based on everything that I just said. I think there were at least 3 or 4 times where I was getting somewhat uncomfortable that the fight hadn't been stopped, but according to everything that I believe about stopping a fight, they were still following all of those rules. Smith was still defending himself. He still was up on his feet. Even though it looked pretty brutal, I thought Herzog did a really good job. That being said, was his corner responsible for stopping the fight at some point? Or was the referee responsible for stopping the fight mid-round or in between rounds when it was clear that Smith wasn't doing so well, much like Herb Dean did with Tony at UFC 249. It was very clear that Tony was dead man walking on his feet, and they eventually called the fight. He had just taken way too much damage, and I did agree with that stop wholeheartedly. So again, using that, was Anthony Smith's corner responsible, or was Herzog responsible for stepping in at the end of one of these rounds and saying, he just doesn't look like he can continue? I'm having a little bit harder time with these because, as Smith put out in a couple statements now, he does not fault his corner. He definitely doesn't fault the ref. He thinks everything was called correctly. And on that basis alone, I've got to agree with him a little bit, because he's paying those people to be in his corner. He's paying them to make those decisions. And if he's not happy with them making those decisions, then that's on him. Hire different people for your corner. That one I would love to hear other people's opinion on, because I'm still kind of on the fence as to how I felt about that, especially after finishing the 4th round. I could not believe they sent him back in for the 5th. His face looked totally different. His eyes were a million miles away. He just didn't look like he was in that fight. I had a conversation with a couple fight professionals, and the way that they put it was they would have said to their fighters, you've got 30 seconds to show me you're still in this, or 60 seconds to show me that you're still in this. And in this case, the fight was stopped by then anyway, but you've got this amount of time to show me that you're still fighting, or we're going to throw in the towel, because you don't look like you want to be here anymore. So show me that you want to be here. Show me that you want to finish this fight. UFC 250. I didn't see as much controversy in this one. I did still see a lot of people saying that the fight should have been stopped when Walt Harris was on top, dealing out plenty of unanswered blows to Alistair Overeem. And again, I've got to go back to my original point with Cruz and Cejudo. At what point do those unanswered shots really, really matter? Is it a number? Is it a weight class? Should there be more of a hard and fast rule around that, so there isn't as much subjectivity and there isn't as much blame put on the referee after the fact? Much like the Teixeira fight, I thought the ref did a good job. It didn't look like the fight was over. As much as I wanted Harris to win, I was really feeling for him in that fight. I thought it was a good call by the ref. But again, there were a lot of other people saying, why was the Cruz fight called and not this one? Because it doesn't seem to match up. So what's the conclusion in all of this? Well, one, there's always going to be controversy. Partly because there's a giant bias. People are watching some of their favorite athletes get bludgeoned, and it's hard not to see it a certain way when your fighter loses. It's just what happens. Should there be a better system in place? Should there be more concrete rules as to what warrants stopping a fight? Should it matter if it's a title fight? Should it matter what weight class they are? Should it matter how much time is left in the round? Should it continue to be more subjective, or should we have more objective rules in place? All right, so that's all for me. I would love to hear from you guys as to what you thought about the fights, what you thought about the stops, and some of the other questions that I've posed. Please like, share, subscribe. Not really sure what my schedule is going to be for these videos, so the best way to see what I'm up to is to follow me on Instagram at sophisticated_MMA. I will attempt to put some sort of a title there so you can see it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!